welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, this is episode 87. As we continue with our new format here, today's episode it features two movies that are going to have you saying, there must be something in the water down under. Both films exhibit that rural Australia, it's not for the faint of heart. There's the immense heat, there's deserts that are bumping up against rocky cliffs, you've got raging rivers, and there's very, very little as far as civilization goes. But most of all, do be sure to steer clear of the locals. First up, it's Apex, the new release movie dropped directly on Netflix this week. And then we're going to go back about a decade to reappraise the 2016 movie Killing Ground. Today's episode is titled Horror in the Outback. Chuck, I guess going into this, I had no idea what you thought of either of these movies. I have no gauge
Yeah,
because on our doc that we typically fill out,
I've
I didn't
contributed
get
nothing.
yeah, I don't have anything. So very curious to see what you thought of these. But yeah, I don't know. You want to just get right into it with Apex here?
Just to briefly explain myself, I just had
Yeah.
way too much going on in terms of my
Mhm.
personal life. Luca had what we found out was a piece of glass that has been stuck in his thumb for like 6 months.
Mhm.
And no, it was not a cyst. All the doctors were wrong until they were right. And now I have a club-handed toddler who's like, do you remember the Undertaker back when like he was fighting Brock Lesnar in a Hell in a Cell and he had a cast on his wrist and he was using
Yep.
it as a weapon? That's what I live with now. So that's really cool. But in terms of this episode and everything, like I have from the womb basically, I am a Austro cinema file, I guess. Like I've always have an affinity for it, but I have to admit I've never seen The Killing Ground. I was conflating it with like three other like hiking horror films, of a similar ilk, but of not nearly the same power. I'll tease that. I was gobsmacked by that fucking movie. And Apex, well, it's fascinating what it is an example of. And in just like the even just in 10 years, Matt, the disparity between what a movie is and what it feels like is never more evident than in these two movies. Having so many similarities on paper and being such totally different experiences in practice. It's going to be really fun to talk about and dig into. But why don't we, yeah, go move right along into this movie that can best be described as, what if you fed Vertical Limit or like and Deliverance through a Kangaroo Jack flavored algorithm? What would the output be? And I argue it's this movie. It is Apex. Because you got this, kind of Burt Reynolds equivalent, this person who just thinks of themselves as some kind of, you know, invincible wilderness conqueror. Like there's nothing that this lady can't do. Charlize Theron's character, except of course keep her climbing partner alive. What? How thankless of a fucking cameo was this by Eric Bana? This first like 5 minutes of the movie. Like how was this worth it for him?
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't even know what the connection is here because the director Balthazar Kormaker, he's not even from Australia, and I don't think they have ever worked together before. So it's not like a thing where he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna call up my friend and see if he wants to be in my movie for 5 minutes." It's just kind of like, well, this movie's mostly set in Australia, except for the part that Eric Bana's in. So I guess we'll get the Australian guy.
Yeah, and God, because like, what movies has Mr. Baltazar done? I'm trying like,
So the only one that I've seen is Everest. From I don't know, I would say like 2017 or something like that, and that was
okay,
decent. I remember that being decent, but He did like that movie Two Guns. Is that Mark Wahlberg and Denzel Washington or something?
That
Never
movie's
saw
ridiculous.
that.
I've seen
Yeah.
clips of it, on reels, and without devoid of context, that movie looks ridiculous.
But yeah, I mean he's a pretty, I don't know, standard, run of the mill workaday filmmaker, I think. I think that he seems to be one of those directors that his output seems to be highly dependent on the strength of the actors that he has in his movies. And I think that that's like no, that's no more the case in this film than with Taron Egerton, because without Taron Egerton, this movie is nothing, like absolutely nothing. It just it falls apart, I think. And I mean, I guess it doesn't fall apart, but it's a very standardized thriller horror, and I found it, frustratingly run of the mill in some parts, and kind of inspired in others, but it just, I don't know, it never really quite got there. Yeah, what did you think, I guess?
I just found it like, unfortunately, very obvious. Because
Yeah.
I'm coming from my artsy fartsy, you know, fart sniffing of I've seen Wake and Fright. I'm hip to like the OG of the genre, the progenitor. Like I know the through line, and there's no other country on this planet that says, you know what, I think the best way to advertise themselves is just make it look like if you come here you die. Because that's what they do in Australian cinema. They do not care how despicable they make themselves look to outsiders, because they make it feel so hostile. I mean, look no further than that like surfer movie with Nick Cage that I think I missed. I don't know if it's out yet, but like that's an
It
example
is.
of
Yeah.
that. It's just this. It did. I just Bluey is the most like PR move I've ever seen, because it softened Australia's perceptions. Because to me, I've always just thought of that land as, if the snakes don't get you, the locals will. And they laid it on so thick in the beginning there with those like hunter guys, where it's like if they were in any reasonable place, and if this is in a non-movie scenario, it would be more than Taron Egerton just being like, "Hey, are these guys messing with you?" Like I think like the cops would get called if, given I guess we're in the Outback, they don't really exist and they don't want to fuck with the locals. But oh man, like I could just see it from the jump. Oh yeah, obviously the other dude whose name is in the post on the poster is probably the bad guy. So unfortunately, the red herring didn't catch for me, and until it got going, I was mostly just there for the adventure wilderness stuff. I've kind of been on that vibe anyway. Like just in my YouTube content watching. And so I was like, yeah, like whitewater kayaking footage. I'm down for that. But once it started turning into, the obvious horror movie, the most dangerous game sort of scenario, I was waiting for it to get interesting. And it only got interesting at the end when it goes full gonzo and you got a man who's filed off his teeth, you know, and it's just fully committed to being weird, but not weird enough. Like kind of like what you alluded to. It doesn't quite go as far as it should. Like the 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 dead family in the cave, they were just sitting there like I guess aging appropriately because he's making human jerky.
Jerky. Yeah.
Spoiler. I guess fuck this. I don't know. That's the thing. This movie is not worth giving a shit about if it is spoiled for you. It is.
Yeah.
It is obvious. It's one of those experiences where it's like you sit down to it and you're like, I know exactly what's going to happen here, and there wasn't like the emotional resonance really wasn't there. This is the kind of movie you could safely put on with your dad, or your grandpa, or even your mom, just for a diversion at night because she'd be into the power fantasy maybe. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean it's very like at the very beginning, I was the movie was really like ticking so many of the predictable boxes for me where I literally, as I was, sitting there on the couch with my wife, I was starting to call stuff out where it's like, okay, I bet Eric Bana is going to die here soon, and I bet that compass is going to turn out to be important in some way. And then, even the first scene, the sort of intro scene, I was like, well, here's the Netflix mandated action scene in the first 5 minutes. Because
Right.
if anybody watched from a couple weeks ago the Joe Rogan interview with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck about the movie The Rip, that was very insightful as to Netflix's sort of process and how they literally mandate that you put some sort of action scene or some sort of exciting scene in the first 5 minutes so that it'll sort of like get people to keep watching. And so it's like, yeah, I can see what you're doing here. I can see the gears turning behind the scenes. And yeah, I largely agree with you where the movie really only gets, you know, interesting in any aspect when Egerton shows up, and even more so when he sort of has his turn, because I did really like his turn and how they played that out with the bracelet, him having the bracelet and him admitting that he basically like went through her stuff and then throwing the backpack out of the tent and
Yeah.
eventually
That was
playing.
that was menacing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, if they had built it up more, if there had been more ambiguity and more time for it to cook. But Netflix
Mhm.
doesn't give you that. And on that note, I don't necessarily think they're wrong about like some of their algorithmically arrived conclusions. Like, yeah, having a memorable set piece at the beginning of a movie is a good way to get people to settle into something. They're not wrong, but about that necessarily. But does every movie need to be like that? No, and they shouldn't. Like, nor should half of the other recommendations that they lay out there. Like, fortunately, there's only really this is a two-hander, functionally. Like, they don't bother crediting any of the local Australians who are in this movie, as far as I'm aware. Like, at least in a major sense, we didn't bother picking them out, and adding them to our graphic or anything like that. But we're just kind of left with this situation where they don't have to talk much. It's mostly just and then all of his weird little like animal noises that he'd make. Like, Taron Egerton
Bird
was,
noises.
yeah, he was doing a good job of like really like being this fucking yoked up cannibal in the Outback. But I just wanted to know more about his motivations and why he was the way he was. And why the fuck
Yeah.
he hadn't been caught yet. Like, you mean to tell me you're going to have all these missing people in this area and you're not going to try and figure out if it's more than just Mother Nature doing it? I guess, like, we kind of have that same phenomena in the United States with our, like, all the people who go missing in our national parks. So I guess
Mhm.
maybe that's just the way it works. And isn't it surprising that this wasn't made in the United States? Like, why was it made in Australia? What is the connection there?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason she goes to Australia, I believe, is because well, for plot reasons, basically, because she's going to the place where Eric Bana was from. I mean,
Uh,
he's Australian, and
okay.
and so I think, I mean, I guess the whole movie leads up to her, like, throwing his compass away, basically. It's her, sort of letting him go, I guess, metaphorically. And so I think that's why it was set in Australia, because yeah, as I said earlier, the filmmaker's not from Australia. Uh, of course, Charlize Theron is not from Australia. Taron Egerton's not from Australia. So it's
It's,
like
it's just the
none of these people are
Tasmanian
from there.
tiger, Eric Bana. He's the only reason that we have to go there at all.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess, it does have a very specific geography where,
Yeah, you're all right. You
he,
alluded to that too. Like, the
yeah.
variety of it as well. Like,
Hmm.
the rainforest ecosystem, the kind of desert vibes, the gorges. Like,
Hmm.
it's worth watching just for the scenery alone, which I guess is the production value that Australia brings you. This is a little bit more interesting than just like going to Yellowstone, I guess. or like
Mhm.
Yosemite, even though those are arguably just as beautiful. But this was unique, and that's another, like, Australia and New Zealand, they both can be whatever you need them to be, which is, kind of, their virtue, as we've learned over the last like 20 years since Lord of the Rings and everything else. And every billionaire has like a special like bug out compound in New Zealand
Yeah,
as
like
well.
bunkers. Yeah.
Yeah, like they all have they've bought New Zealand citizenship. Like that's a little known fact about our hero, Gabe Newell of Valve. He was one of the first people. He pioneered that move.
Mhm.
We just have to visit or watch these movies, which make me not want to.
Yeah, and I do, speaking of sort of the geography and stuff like that, and the scenery, I do give Theron credit. I watched, in leading up to this episode, I watched a lot of behind the scenes footage for this,
Oh, really?
and um, it is a lot of the time, it is actually her doing the climbing and the kayaking, and you can tell that it is actually her doing those things. She trained with a real life, like world class climber, and I really have to credit the movie for, because a lot of times you can tell when they're trying to fudge, like they're shooting actors from like below the neck, so you can't tell that it's like a stunt person, or they're shooting from like a football field's length away, so you can't tell that it's not the actor, and
Hmm.
you can really tell that it's her most of the time. I think the only time that I could tell it was a stunt double was, when the kayak really drops, like over a big drop over the river rapids, or some of the wide shots while she's climbing were obviously somebody else. But for the most part, it is definitely Charlize Theron who's doing all the stuff.
Yeah, even when she's like in the beginning, when she's like doing that bouldering or attempting to boulder up to that summit, like
Hmm.
that was looked like it was her banging against the fake mountain. I'm assuming that they were
Hmm.
working with, because I do want to say, like, that opening shot of her in the tent and unzipping it and then just like looking down, that freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, just posting your tent up on a cliffside. Yeah.
but it, like, it was one of those moments that made me mad that this was a Netflix movie, because
Mm.
this would have been a visceral and kind of a little bit of an incredible theatrical experience, even if it
Hmm.
would have been a middling movie. It still would have been more fun to see it in a theater. Like, and not just for like my artsy fartsy snooty reasons. Just like I just want the visceral experience of a movie like this there. Instead of just in front of my monitor. In my little closet office that I've created over here. I wanted to get smacked in the face. And this movie was asking to do that. Like, it needed more balls, it needed more edge. But as I guess we'll find out when we move on to the second part of this, maybe it is possible to have too much. So and again, we got a good yin yang going here, a dichotomy between these two. But any final comments before we move on?
Yeah, I guess I will mention again the final 20 minutes I do think were really well executed. That was probably like the most I was invested in the movie when basically Sasha and Ben are tied together, and his leg is broken, and basically she has to sort of uh take charge of the situation, and it was doing something a little more interesting than the rest of the movie there, where there was that tension of like, okay, when is she going to try and drop him, and is he gonna notice? And of course he does, and then she eventually shakes him off, and then he just gets splatted on the cliffside. And I really enjoyed that
Yeah.
little section of the movie, and I also appreciate the restraint of them not having him like come back for one final jump
Yeah,
scare,
no shit.
even though he was like clearly just like deader than dead. I could have totally seen them like going for the one final jump scare where he like grabs her ankle and tries to pull her off the top of
with
the
like
mountain when she gets.
with his face like half falling off, like
Yeah.
yeah, he's the Terminator. They
Mhm.
they could have gone that route. And
Yeah.
a
But yeah,
yeah,
I don't think there's really much more to say. I mean, we've sort of exhausted our talking points for how just kind of mediocre this movie
yeah,
was, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this next one, I'll just say, Killing Ground is not mediocre. This is
Mm.
the kind of nasty, fucked up, unrelentingly like dark and nihilistic Australian tourist horror movie like that I love and look for and long for. But this one just did not make me feel good at all at the end of it. And I'm kind of glad I didn't see it until now, just because it's now gets to be so fresh and pure for me. Because I'd have way more baggage if I had seen this in the past, I guess is all I'm saying. But the premise that it gives us to start out with is an excellent hook. You show up at a campground, you're getting settled, you're getting just ready to relax. You see that someone is next to you, but they haven't shown up in a while. That's kind of weird. And then suddenly you run into a fucking toddler. And where could the movie go from there? Oh, so many places, but like in an excellent way to just throw you into the buzzsaw that is Killing Ground.
Yeah, I wanted to title this. I put in my notes nihilism in the bush because
Yeah,
that's what they kind of call, and because this movie really gets under your skin, and in my opinion, a good way. I there are many people who would not agree with that, but I think it's a good thing. Um, and I like its dual timeline gimmick. I think that's a really good gimmick. It keeps you invested. This movie is, to me, it's more satisfying as this exercise in, building tension and like never letting it release. It's just pure tension. As opposed to like a well-rounded movie, the character developments, it's very sparse. There's sort of a lack of any sort of goal-oriented plot, and so I didn't find myself particularly endeared to any of the people, the protagonists, beyond just not wanting to see them die,
yeah,
basically. And so the movie is very effective in its sort of slow rollout of information, and we know that something is very, very wrong, but we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop as the audience. And this movie, I would compare it a lot to the last movie that we reviewed, The Drama, where I think the most interesting aspect of this movie is the conversation about it off the screen, where there are people out there that fucking hate this movie, like with
yeah,
a
yeah. I
passion.
bet. Yeah,
And yeah, and it's the conversations that this movie inspires just through its very existence are really interesting to me. So yeah, it was a lot more of an interesting watch than Apex. But yeah, yeah,
yeah.
where do you want to go from here?
Well, let's see here. First of all, Damien Power, a guy who great name,
Yeah.
and got like because I wanted to find out more about the guy, and he's got
Yeah,
like no
he did
credits.
that Hulu. I don't know if you ever watched it, but he did a direct to Hulu movie. I think around the time of COVID, like the COVID time, when that was about. I watched it. I don't remember it being particularly memorable, but I did watch it, and it was like about people who were like stranded in a snowstorm at like
Oh, no
a
exit.
rest stop.
That's
Yeah,
what it was.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because then she finds like that they've kidnapped a girl or something like that, and she's in a van, and she doesn't
yeah.
know who it. So like it was okay, and but yeah, not memorable obviously enough. This one fucking was though, or like it will prove to be more so is my point. Um,
Well, there's a
And
lot of memorable images in it. It's like that's when I think about this movie, just thinking back on it. I watched it about a week ago, and I just think of these like memorable these sort of tableaus of like the shot of like the baby walking around in the background of that one shot, and like the I can see why when you look at the poster for this movie, it's the girl's face with the duct tape over her mouth and the can on her head, and it's like I can see why they use sort of the William Tell target practice scene as the cover art, because it's just so unbearably tense, that scene. And yeah, just the image of the abandoned tent on the beach is just so chilling, and it gets more and more chilling as the movie goes on, and you realize, oh, these people are not, they're clearly not coming back. And
nope,
so
nope.
yeah.
And that's what was like when I, just to compare to Apex here. This movie was designed to cook slowly. Very intentionally, very deliberately. Netflix would have completely eviscerated this script if they had gotten their hands on it. For example, like if and that's why I miss the old model. I miss when it was just people making content and then selling it, to like Netflix so they could get it seen, as opposed to Netflix outright having so much control over the end product. Like this. That's my little soapbox rant, because we don't really have a news section anymore, but it's emblematic of that, I think. Because this kind of movie, I don't know that you could make it happen today, obviously, because he was kind of fed into that system through No Exit, and who knows what that movie may have been like, outside of this paradigm. Because like this, nobody wants to make a movie this uncomfortable, because they know it won't sell. When you're trying to, it is, people are going to either want refunds after they see this, or like want to like sue you. Because
Yeah.
you've traumatized them so much.
Yeah, I mean, props to this is the type of movie that you have. I mean, it only gets made because he like raised his own money to make it. There's really no notable actors in it. Um, it's a very low budget, and I do also give props to the company that eventually picked this up for distribution was IFC,
That's right.
the independent film channel. Under their they have a sub label called IFC Midnight, and so I give them props because IFC has always been sort of a champion of weird stuff, unedited stuff. Famously, the IFC cable channel is famously not edited. They only show when they show movies on that channel. They're not edited in any way, unlike every other cable channel. And so, yeah, props to them for having the sort of balls to make something, or not make something, but distribute something like this.
Yeah, to get it out there, because
Hmm.
it isn't it. Yeah, because obviously it would be, I think, cheap to just call this torture porn, because
Hmm.
because unlike torture porn, it is more about the build up to the violence, or the awful thing, or even better, ambiguity about whether or not something awful can or will happen in the future. It's not afraid to just leave you unsettled, in an unsettled place narratively, just because it's an unsettled situation, and it
Yeah.
should be, and not just like, oh, there's things that could work that haven't been worked out yet. You just are out of sorts afterwards, and I think like it's like funny games in that respect more so.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Even though he's not trying to make you feel guilty, like Haneke did, but the two killers in this definitely gave me that vibe, without like without fully breaking the fourth wall. They were so capable and so terrifying, and just like that polite menace that all Australians seem to have once you get outside of their urban centers and you're in the bush. and you're like, oh, you're in the yaba now, mate. Like, you're fucked. Like that. Like, once you're there, and people are smiling at you, but the eyes aren't. Like that's the vibe, and that's what makes me feel uncomfortable. And what I hate more than just seeing violence befall somebody, it's like I can't handle cringe, and I can't handle like the like weird unconscious and like knowledge and awareness that you are not okay. and
Yes.
and I yeah the it's not something that I've encountered much in real life, fortunately. In the same, I've never felt like I was about to get hurt by
Okay.
somebody. Except for that one time, maybe when, like, we were making that short film that still, it needs to be edited, that's sitting on a hard drive somewhere, that I did with Scott Ecker and like Eric Bradshaw and those people. We were shooting behind Dempsey's, like in that alley in
Oh,
Fargo,
sure.
and this completely whacked out homeless person just started saying that he wanted to kill black people, and was just running up and down the alley saying he wanted to hurt black people. So we
Oh my
called
God.
the cops. They got
Okay.
him out of there, finished our shooting, and then we went inside and started drinking because we were so fucking stressed out. Like,
I'm glad you brought that up because the premise of this movie, it really made me think about that. It's kind of a non sequitur, but I had put in our doc before the show, have you ever been in a situation like this where, you're in like a place and something doesn't feel quite right, and you only really realize afterwards, like, oh, I was in like serious harm there. And um for me, that moment was kind of a really strange situation where when I was a kid, I mean, I think I was like 13, 14 years old. And my mom at the time, she dated a guy who owned a limo service in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. And he would just, when he was off the clock, he would just drive the limo that he owned just around town, as his car. And we went to a Mexican restaurant just right outside town. And I was like a shitty little 13, 14 year old, and me and his son, the man that my mom was dating, he had a son that was about my same age. We were kind of, I don't know, kind of just being shitty teenagers to the group of people that were like two booths away from us in the restaurant. And, just kind of, doing dumb stuff like making faces, or just kind of like making noises. It was nothing like that bad, but I remember that when we left the restaurant, we were followed home by these people,
the
and
fuck?
it was a really strange situation, and they followed. I don't know if they were like planning on robbing us or if they just wanted to intimidate us, but basically when we were done at the eating at the restaurant, we all piled in, into the limo, and me and this guy's son, we kept looking out the back window and seeing that these people were basically following us. And again, I mentioned this was in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, which is a small lake town. There's really no reason why somebody would be, taking the exact same route home as you do, because it's fairly rural. And so it was a scary situation for when I was that age, and nothing ever came of it, obviously, where they basically just, didn't follow us into the driveway, but it was very, very weird. So,
See, like when a cop does it, you at least know, okay, they have something planned,
yeah.
but or a reason, and I must have done something wrong. But that's weird, man. But that's the vibe, and like it's the same with Apex too. Like when that one, like when she's like when she's at that camping spot, and she's getting freaked out by the local hunters, so she goes into her truck, locks the doors because that dude's just like standing there, just like, we're just trying to be nice. Like it's like fuck that, dude. Fuck that. No, like
Yeah.
there
Yeah, she
is
basically just sits there all night. I'm assuming she probably didn't sleep with her pepper spray, like death gripping her pepper spray, basically.
yeah, because it's like that because they've blocked her in. It's like that is such a menacing situation. I don't know.
Mhm.
It because like even male female, I would feel threatened by that, and that
Yeah.
would be just be a step too far. And but back to as far as killing
Yeah.
ground goes.
Well, I
Yeah,
wanted to you had made a quick mention of it, but I want to go back to the torture porn sort of
yeah,
moniker on this one where of course as I've said before, I like to do sort of some digging on movies that we watch as far as like what other people are saying about it, both critics and just kind of the public at large. And a lot of the conversation around this one, what it reminds me of actually is shout out to the guy who commented on our last video.
oh yeah,
It reminds me of that guy where any conversation about this movie that people try and have online is just inundated with people that are like, no, you can't like this. This is pure torture porn. You're a sick fuck if you like this. Nope, nope, not gonna listen. La 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 la. That type of sort of mentality. And people are so quick to slap that torture porn sort of moniker on this, and I'm curious as why you think that is. Why? Because it clearly isn't. I mean,
yeah,
torture porn, torture the label of torture porn came about with movies like Saw and Hostel, and those are movies they're known for their over the top visceral gore and these prolonged periods of suffering. And so I'm curious as to
yeah.
why you think that
Like,
is.
like with torture, like to be torture porn to me, there has to be some sadism in the mix, where it's
Mhm.
like they are fetishizing something about the violence, in a way that like it's titillating,
Mhm.
instead of being repulsive or something that's shocking. It's like if it's how the lens fixates on the violence and the gore, and and like does it linger, and I think is especially in reference to the discussion in the comments on our last episode. I think that is just I think it's lame to just call it a tired criticism, but I think it's just a misapplied criticism. They're criticizing a different era of movies that did incorporate like nudity and violence, particularly in like the late 70s and the 80s, like the video nasty kind of era, where it was how much blood and how many boobs can we have on screen at one time? And oh, we're simulating rape. Well, that's one way to get sex in the movie, then we'll do that. But in movies like The Killing Ground and in a history of violence, it's not to titillate you. It's supposed to have the opposite effect. It is meant to make you feel ill and sick to your stomach. And if an individual is titillated by it, that's between them and their god and the authorities, depending on how far their tastes veer into reality. But yeah, I guess yeah,
Mhm.
that's my yet again my little soapbox moment. Because
Yeah.
while like the killing ground is rough, like that's the point, and that's what I appreciated about it, because it didn't infantilize me while it did it, and it treated me like an adult, and it knew I could handle it, and I respect the effort that he threaded the needle, in my opinion, as far as it goes of making something endurable and enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that people I like that you use sort of the term sort of misappropriating criticism
Yeah,
because there's a lot of people that are frustrated with this movie because of reasons that have nothing to do with torture porn, but I think they sort of misappropriate that term because there's the killers themselves are frustrating because they don't really show remorse. you don't really know why they're doing what they're doing, other than I think their line of thinking literally doesn't extend far. It's not like they're not like stating their like beliefs, so they're not like stating their motivations in like a really ham-fisted way. They're just kind of business as usual. This is just what we do. And there's also the perceived lack of closure where there are a number of things in this movie in which we don't get any closure about, as far as like you don't really see what happens to the baby. You don't really see what happens to the couple after the hospital. She shows up in the hospital room. There's sort of this perceived we don't get like we don't get the apex like fake newscast
Yeah.
where it's like
Oh, that killed me.
yeah, like authorities today found a bunch of dead people in the wilderness and one man is responsible. You don't get that either. And so there's sort of these lingering questions, and you have to fill in the blanks in some aspects. And so I think people are really frustrated by that, and so that they kind of take it out on the movie in sort of misappropriated ways.
Yeah, but like yet again, to me, that ambiguity, it's difficult to swallow, but it does, leave you, with more to think about. And,
Mhm.
and yeah, it is like you're just trying to think of like, well, what could happen after this? But I mean, to tie a movie like this up with a bow would really be a disservice to it. And it's better to leave something for the audience to untangle themselves. And I know that, yeah, like that's frustrating. People, the algorithm will argue that people like clean conclusions, but the reality of the situation to me, is that, yeah, they would not have found, like, yeah, the child would still be out there, probably dead. That's just probably what is going to happen here. That's the end of the story. But it wasn't for lack of trying. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
and like in it, I'm sorry, I much rather preferred not having someone just go, I wear fake teeth and I eat people so they become part of me. Like it didn't, like, it just makes them into a cartoon instead of a monster. And you know yeah, it's to have it be so matter of fact makes it hit so much harder. And just like they're evil, like the banality of what yeah, like you say, this is just what we do. It's Tuesday. These people were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Which calls to mind like Deliverance. Like, and then that was an alternative, like, I guess, title for this was Deliverance Down Under, or like something like that. Because yet again, yeah, it's like the yokels, the evil yokels, the cannibal yokel trope. Was really, like, what really well done in Killing Ground, and even in Apex, as cartoonish as it is, I it worked, even though it was obvious. The like one movie was microwaved, and the other was smoked to perfection.
Yeah,
You know.
that's a good way to put it. Yeah. And I like, personally, I like being able to, some of those unanswered questions. I like being able to sort of examine the details and to sort of provide my own head canon for what happens, because
Yeah.
I do think that he gives you, Damian Power gives you that one last shot that we get of baby Ollie when the dog walks up and basically sits next to him. And I would like to believe
Same.
that he gave us that shot because presumably, what's her name? Sam is going to tell, investigators like, hey, there's a baby out there. You need to go find it. And presumably, hopefully they get out there fast enough. And also like with her going into the hospital, Ian, I think is his name, going into Ian's hospital room at the end there, and that's kind of where that we leave it. And I don't know, I would like to provide my own headcanon there that I'm pretty sure that it's safe to say that the engagement is off
Yeah.
because she clearly was looking at him a different way because he sort of showed his true colors by being a coward. And you have that whole scene where she's like, what'd you do with baby Ollie? And he's like, I never went back for
Yeah.
baby
Yeah. No,
Ollie. And
God. Yeah.
yeah.
But let's see.
And so,
Yeah. And that's what's missing from Apex, man. Like, why kill Eric Bana? Keep him
yeah.
around. Keep him
Mhm.
around to be killed by the bad guy, yeah, or something, like to have to have that unresolved aspect of their relationship to be the like pushing the limit too far, and like missed opportunities, because yeah, there's actually some emotional resonance here. Like you could almost elevator pitch Killing Ground as a couple's engagement gets destroyed on a camping trip. Like you could have totally buried the whole lead that way. And honestly, in support of your headcanon, how many stories have we seen about hero animals saving small children in the wilderness? Like this baby was, on its own for 7 days, but it was rescued by this, hero, pit bull or whatever the fuck it was. This nanny
Yeah.
dog saved the day. It didn't maul him, thank God. God.
Yeah.
What movie did
Yeah.
that happen in? That happened in Where Evil Lurks. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. The
God
dog just,
damn.
yeah, murdering that girl. Yeah. At like
Ugh.
and you knew that was going to happen to her.
Yeah.
That was an unbelievably
Well,
tension filled scene. But
it kind of we're bibble babbling at the end here, but like it's just speaking of other like heinously like, I don't know, movies that are difficult. Have you seen The Coffee Table?
I have not. No, I don't even know what that is.
Okay, don't look anything up about that. We're keeping that in our back pocket for later.
Okay.
That's all.
Sure.
Okay, don't, please promise me you won't research this movie whatsoever.
No, I won't. Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna hold you
we can check that one out. Yeah.
okay, okay. Because I need to find out where we can see it, because that's going to be
Okay.
something we do in the very near future. Because I
Okay.
I know that we're putting people through the ringer a little bit. We're watching. We might need to go lighter fare, if for the like the next couple
Mhm.
weeks or something. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But
Mhm.
thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for watching along with us. And we'll see you all next time.
Yeah. See ya.